Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So today I'll be checking Grand Theft Auto 5 Enhanced Edition running on Xbox Series X. PlayStation 5 received pretty much the same update. I'm not sure how that looks like on Xbox Series S, to be honest with you, but on Xbox Series X this game offers three different graphics modes. Performance RT, so performance ray tracing, and Fidelity mode. I think the biggest change between these different modes are shadows, and I think ambient occlusion. I think that's pretty much it. But to be honest with you, like people say that the shadows are ray traced and that kind of stuff, but I don't really see much of a difference, right? I mean, look at the shadow over here of the pole, right, or the character, right? So right now I've got this game set to performance, so no ray tracing here. So if I switch it to performance RT, that looks very similar. Like I don't see much of a difference, if any at all. Maybe the shadow is a little bit, like, I think the correct word for it would be diffused. But so if I switch back to performance mode, so no ray tracing, shadow is a little bit more sharp, so maybe like faked. But this is the thing. Like, the fact that something is ray traced doesn't necessarily mean that it looks better, because like if I didn't know and you just showed me that, right, I would be like, yeah, I mean, this shadow looks better because it's sharper, right? But it's not natural. So natural light behaves like it's more diffused. That's why when you actually switch to between these modes, ray traced shadows looks like a little bit more blurry, if you know what I mean, but I guess more natural. But that doesn't necessarily mean that they look better. So there we go. Like, look at the shadow. Like, the shadow is diffuse. It's not as crisp, if you know what I mean. Same for the main character. So, and of course, another thing is that we don't necessarily know what's the quality setting for the ray tracing. So this is the thing. Ray tracing doesn't always look better, right? Because it also depend on the quality of ray tracing and stuff. That's a good thing to actually test. You can see on the wall there's a shadow of the palm tree. So let's check how's that's going to change in the normal performance mode. It should be sharper, and I would say actually the shadow looks better. So this is the thing. I mean, actually you see a little bit of artifacting there, but it's more. Actually, it looks better. So this is the thing with ray tracing. Sometimes ray tracing is not always the right call in every single. So look at it. Like, I think that ray tracing in this game is of a low quality. That's why you see these artifacts. Look at the quality of the shadow. It's you see like these huge like pixel like. You see those edges, which are not nice and smooth. If I switch back to normal mode, the shadow is actually like less. There's less artifacting on it, right? So yeah, shadows. I think that the main thing about ray tracing here are shadows. Let's check reflections. So now ray tracing is off, and you can see the building over there being reflected over here, I think. Yeah, but that's, I think, like some standard method. So let's switch it to performance ray tracing. And yeah, nothing changes. So that means that there's no ray traced reflections. So I think the only thing that is being ray traced here are shadows and ambient occlusion, probably. That's pretty much it. Let's actually see if the let's switch back to performance again. Yeah. So you really have to focus, you really have to look close to actually see the difference. And like during gameplay, there's hardly any difference. So I would actually, you know, both performance RT and performance modes do run at 60 frames per second. I'm not sure about the resolution. They seem to be very similar. But I think it's not worth it anyway, right? I mean, it's actually funny that I say that, but performance mode actually shadows in like a standard rasterized shadows actually look better. Okay, so there's another one, another setting, of course, which I spoke about, which is Fidelity. And the thing about Fidelity is that's the way to play this game if you really want the best graphics. I'm not sure if the shadows are ray traced. They may be. Because they look at the shadows, they are artifacted. So I think that they may be using ray traced shadows in Fidelity mode. But the biggest thing about Fidelity mode is that this mode, it's super sharp because it's 4K, and you can see that the game is much sharper, or at least close to 4K. There's no ray traced reflections. So it looks like the big change is the higher resolution. Unfortunately, 30 frames per second and ray traced shadows, I think, right? I think these are ray traced shadows. So overall, I think the best way to play this game is performance mode, because like even though in Fidelity mode the game looks very, very nice. Actually, this game looks very nice anyway. And of course, the thing is that like textures look much better, because of course the resolution affects the you know, the quality of textures and all the assets in the game. So like all these small details you couldn't see in 1080p or any lower resolution, actually you can see them now. Everything is nice and sharp. Although look at that kind of a church building in front of me, just far in the distance. You see the texture on that building is like, you know, very low quality, and that doesn't change. Like, you know, obviously if I get closer to that building, it will load the better quality of the texture. But like, you know, some of these objects, some of these buildings from the distance just don't look good. There's still a lot of pop-in, especially during driving. I will get into the car in a minute and I'll show you. So yeah, you know, that's, you know, there's still, this is still, let's remember, this is still an old game. Yeah, it's been improved here and there, better texture than on Xbox 360, but this is still Xbox 360 game, right? So let's drive around in Fidelity mode for a second. Let's check that church. Yeah, as I get closer, as I'm getting closer, like, yeah, obviously you can see now that the textures not actually, you know, the quality now improved, right? So, but you know, some of these objects, when they are far in the distance, they use poor quality assets basically. And you know, like, this game just don't feel right when you play it in 30 frames per second. You know, the driving is a little bit more difficult, aiming is a little bit more difficult as well, because it's not as responsive and stuff. There's a lot of pop-in, as you can see, on the buildings, even in Fidelity mode. So it's pretty much the only thing in obviously Fidelity mode is that everything is sharper. Even some objects in the distance are just sharper, so like it looks better. But other than that, there's not much of a difference in between these modes. So let's switch back to performance mode. And So now game is much it's not as sharp, especially when you look at the objects in the distance. Come on, let me through. But it's super smooth, and you know, it's more responsive. It feels great to play. You know, I would love 4K 60 frames per second mode, and it's actually interesting that, you know, even though we're talking about Xbox, I mean Xbox One run this game at 1080p 30, so you would imagine that 4K 60 on Xbox Series X shouldn't be a problem, but it looks like they, for whatever reason, they didn't go that route. So I mean, that game just looks so much better in 4K. But anyway, this game now is much better, and now it's getting darker and stuff. The lights, actually, I think they did improve the lighting system overall. So you know what, I'm just out of curiosity, I wonder if the ray tracing actually has any, if there's any difference in ray tracing mode. Oh, sure. Ray tracing mode. No, I don't see any difference. Do you see any difference? Yeah, but it's interesting that this game still looks good despite all the years. The game still looks good. Yeah, textures are still pretty detailed and stuff, but they just are not as sharp. The only annoying thing is that I can't disable motion blur. It's not big of a problem when you drive a car, but when you actually run around the city, you know, it's a bit annoying, the motion blur, I mean. Yeah, guys, I don't see any difference between. So it looks like the lighting, I mean, lighting system seems to be a little bit better overall, but I'm talking about difference between the modes, right? It's same lighting system. It's actually, this game looks good. Like, I mean, I know. This is still the same, pretty much the same game we're talking about here. The same game that was released on Xbox 360 and then PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, but it just looks good and it's fluid now, so it's great. So guys, that's the video, that's the game for you. Is it worth playing again and stuff? I mean, it's hard to say. I think that you know, for those of you that play a lot of Grand Theft Auto, I think if you've got one of those next-gen systems, current-gen systems, I should say, I think it's worth it, especially on PlayStation, because you can actually get it for like $10 right now, right? So, and it's you know, I know that the graphics didn't change much, but you know, resolution and frame rate alone, I think it's worth it if you play, especially if you play online, GTA 5 online. So you'll probably be spending a lot of time playing that game, so I think it's worth it. And yeah, the game looks good. All these years later, the game still looks good. Especially, there's something about the night, like with all these neon lights and lights overall. You know, it looks good. It still looks good. Crazy, right? But anyway, guys, that's the video. Thanks a lot for tuning in. Thanks for support. Really appreciate it. And I will see you all in the next one. Take care.